Hey, thank you all so much for joining another episode of Celeste the Therapist podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist and I love helping people shift the way they think. And I've been doing that by talking about things that people are dealing with. I do that with a special guest most of the time. But I also enjoy talking about relationships. I think relationships are one of the most complicated things that people deal with because you're dealing with another person. And a lot of times, a lot of the things that we got going on, it mixes in with our relationships. So the way I do that is I have Jeff come on and I'm going to add him to the stream where he helps me answer these questions about relationships. Jeff, can you introduce yourself to my audience, please?
Hey, Celeste, how you doing? I'm
Good.
Jeff. I'm a executive coach, trainer, facilitator, all those things. Basically, what that means is I help folks work with assholes without being an asshole. Or another way that look at it sometimes is I just help people get out their own way.
Yeah. And do you think it's accurate that a lot of times people don't realize that they are in their own way? Do you find when you're working with people, it feels like everybody outside of them needs to like create that change?
I would say that's the default position of humanity, right? I have a big problem, and my problem is other people. And when they change, finally, my life will finally start to take shape. And the whole work is realizing all the things that you can do in order to be better based on the fact that most of the time, most other folks, they got their own struggles. They're going to be who they be.
Mm-hmm. That is true. That is true. So we're gonna jump right into the show because we have a lot of questions. And the way this works is if you're new to this podcast, people actually write in and anonymously on the website and ask different questions. The questions does not have to be about a romantic partner. It can be about anything that has to do with relationships. So the first question, and Jeff doesn't see the questions, only I do. The first question is asking, can you please explain how a parent's negative attitude can affect their child?
Whew. Can you please explain how a parent's negative attitude can affect their child? I note too that this is numbered, so they must have had like 1, 2, 3.
No, so I numbered them so I won't get confused as I'm like sharing the questions because there's
Oh,
a
I see.
question
Okay, I
that's
thought they
super
were like
long.
in fives. I want this. So this is a broad question, Celeste. But one thing I'll say, there's two things. First of all, there's a general when you say a negative attitude, there's you know people try to tell their kids, do as I say, not as I do, right?
Yeah,
But in
yeah.
fact, your kids are going to generally be strongly influenced by the environment they're in, including the environment that you create. As an example, Celeste, you ever open your mouth and then you hear your mother come out? Like, if y'all don't get down off that chair right now, and you realize, I said that just how my mother did. It's not that I'm trying to sound like my mother. It's that she is the model of what mothering is. So I unconsciously copy her. I talk like she talks. I say her stuff, right? It's just what
Yeah,
I do. By
yeah.
An easy example is when I go to the grocery store, I buy Skippy peanut butter. Now, if you ask me, Jeff, do you like Peter Pan less? I say, actually, I don't know what Peter Pan tastes like. How about the generic store brand? How about this? How about that? I just buy the one that I grew up eating. My mother bought Skippy. I don't even know what the other peanut butters even taste like. I just do what they do. So then conversely, if your parent is always like, woe is me, everything is bad, or they pop off if they feel that they've been disrespected by a cashier and suddenly they go nuts on them, then the child has a greater chance of thinking that that's how you handle that. That's how that's been
Mhm.
modeled,
Yep,
right? Just like
yep.
you might mop the way your mom mops, just like you might yell at the TV because you grew up watching your dad yell at the TV. So too might you yell at people because you grew up watching your dad yell at people. So too
Hmm.
might you, uh, uh, catastrophize, right? So one bad
Hmm.
thing goes wrong. You go, why does this always happen to me? It seems like everybody's lucky but me, and I can't. I knew I should have never tried because when you try, you just let down, and then you find yourself doing that too.
Yeah,
That's one
yep,
way, right? That makes sense.
yep. And a lot of times people don't even realize it's happening that way. Because sometimes some of the behaviors that people exhibit that their parents do, they'll say like they don't like the fact that their parents do certain things, not realizing they've taken it on. And it's not like a parent sits and says, "Hey, Jeff, like I want you to have a negative attitude like I do." When you're in that space for so long, you eventually start to develop that same habits that in the environment that you're in.
Exactly. The other thing too is, let's say, not just in terms of modeling, but in terms of the interaction. So you say, "Mom,
Mhm.
guess what? I got a B on my test." And she goes, so what happened? How come you couldn't get an A?"
Dang, yeah.
Right. And while it is true that I guess an A is better than a B, that immediate going to which ones did you get wrong, or
Yeah.
why aren't you enough, or whatever it is, can definitely shape the way that a child develops. I'll give you one example. Working with a person who, they keep missing deadlines at work. Okay, they're an
Mhm.
executive, but they keep missing deadlines at work, and the reason is because the thing that they're being asked to do at work is it's challenging. It's like a new project. You get, there's no template, so they have to make it all up, and they're agonizing. They're agonizing over, is this good enough? Is this enough? I'll send it when it's perfect. Meanwhile, it's 4 days late, 5 days late. Well, when I talked to them, I said, uh, "Your parent, you're parenting. How do they treat your grades?" And they said, "Oh, they were very strict on us. Nothing but an A is was acceptable.
Mm.
Nothing but an A." And you could see how spending all that time under a parent who says only perfect is good enough, that
Yep.
turns someone into, what they would say is, "I'm a perfectionist," but I actually don't use the word perfectionist, Celeste. And the reason why I don't use it is because it sounds a little flattering, right? Ooh, I'm me.
Right.
Only perfect is good enough for me. The psychological term for it is a maximizer. I can only do things when they're at their maximum. But in this
Yep.
case, this person's boss is explicitly telling them, "Get this to me by Monday," and they're turning it in on Friday. And then they're saying, "Well, they had to be perfect." How can it possibly be perfect when you miss the deadline by 5 days?
Right, right.
They're unable to turn in something that doesn't feel totally perfect because they've
Yeah.
been kind of conditioned in this way by a parent's well-meaning but unrealistically a negative outlook, that if you don't get 100, you somehow messed up and
Yeah.
need to be checked on that. That's like one
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, I think you delivered a lot of people. That's a great example for, a lot of people in certain households do grow up with this kind of like A is better. I mean, A has to happen. Other anything less than an A is not acceptable, and end up finding themselves doing that in different ways in their own environment without realizing the correlation, right? A lot of
Right.
times we don't realize the correlation to our behaviors until we actually pause, maybe work with somebody who kind of helps us reflect in those kind of ways. Hey, Liz.
Right. Liz
Yeah, that makes a
agrees.
lot of
Right. People
sense.
out, they get paralyzed by this. The phrase is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Right. The idea that you're so obsessed with being perfect that you actually don't turn things in at all. Sometimes it makes people
Yeah.
procrastinate. Other times it gives people
Yes.
heavy anxiety. But the fact is, this idea that I'm going to be perfect is actually holding them back. And that's one way that parents.
Yeah.
It's not that you can't become a perfectionist. It's not that you can't become a
Right.
maximizer without this.
Right.
But in this case,
Right.
you could draw a direct line between parents saying either you get an A plus or it's an F. That
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
pass fail where only perfect is passed. They drew that line thinking, I'm sure the parents thought, like, I'm setting high standards for this person. But life is not like that. School's easy compared to
It's
life,
not.
right?
Yeah.
And a lot of things in life are, you say, I'm making this up. You say, I want this party to go great. It's going to be my whatever, my baby shower or my wedding, and they say it has to be perfect. Well, there's really no such thing as perfect. Something almost definitely is going to go wrong,
Yeah.
and the purpose of a wedding is not to be perfect. It's to celebrate a union. But people lose sight of that because they start thinking things have to be perfect and actually make it worse. And that was that
Yeah.
show, Bridezillas or whatever it is, right? This basic idea. So that's one
Yeah.
way that a parent's negative outlook, well, those are two ways that a parent's negative outlook
Yeah.
and attitude can harm a child.
Yeah. So to answer your question, letter writer, a negative attitude can affect whether it's something like that, whether it's something like that you're struggling with mood wise. I think that we don't realize how much our children are absorbing the things that we do or not do. So thank you for that. So the next question says, in a healthy relationship, not disclosing certain information about yourself, is that lying by omission? For example, me having a child has not come up in a conversation yet, and I just haven't shared that information yet. Is that lying because the person never asks? We've been talking for about a month.
Mm,
I don't know.
mm.
When Jeff
Well,
says he has a lot to say,
well, it's
he doesn't
interesting.
know
This
where to
question's
start.
so they're saying that, I'm not disclosing information about myself. They're using the term lying by omission, so they acknowledge that just not saying anything. You say, well, technically, I didn't say I didn't have a kid. I just didn't mention that I have a kid. Okay, but you've been talking for a month. Well, if the assumption is that we're talking and we're seeing if we're a good pair to be mates and possibly life mates, how relevant is whether somebody has a child or not to whether or not they can possibly be life mates? Isn't that kind of a thing that some people consider a deal breaker? Let's be honest with ourselves here, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's
There are
something.
definitely, it's not outrageous for somebody to say, hey, I'm looking to partner with somebody who we're both starting at the same place, right? And so depending on what this relationship's going for, now, if it's just hooking up, then I think you say, well, if we meet each other's attractive and physical and sexual needs, then that's enough. We meet up at night, we hook up, we go home. Fine. But if we're talking about like, oh, so what's your favorite color? And what do you like to do? And we're trying to see like, oh, are we going to hold hands and go steady and do all that stuff? It seems to me that the longer you wait to say to somebody, I have a kid, the more they're going to feel blindsided.
Yeah.
Right. Because we're really looking to see if our lifestyles match up. And so is it a lie by omission? Every conversation where I have a kid is omitted is more fuel to the lie by omission fire. You don't necessarily have to lead with it. On dating apps, whatever, Tinder or Hinge, people say, I'm a mother of two, or I'm a girl dad or whatever. And they lead with it explicitly because they know some people would screen them out for that. And they're saying, let's skip the part where you say you like me, and then you find out I have kids, and then you want to discontinue. My kids come with me as a package deal. Right now, you might be, you know what this is like? It's like when you go on a job interview and they duck and dodge on the salary and they won't just type it in. Like, look, we all know that a big part of working here is the salary. So at what point are we going to talk about what this job pays? And anyway, whether or not, oh, my baby, you don't know, but I'm impetuous. Celeste, I bought us both tickets to France. We're going to go to France for 2 weeks. You go, I can't because who will watch my daughter? And I go, daughter? You got a daughter? Come on, dog. You know what you're doing. So letter writer, let's be real. You know what you're doing.
Well, okay. So for they said for example, but what about in general? Are there things you've been dating for about a month? It's fair to say like you're not going to share everything, but something as huge as a child is one of those things that are there permanently. It's not, you can't change it. It kind of is a part of you, right?
So the phrase "all's fair in love and war." Right? All is fair in love and war. That's the idea that, like, while I don't think you should be able to discriminate from a job based on somebody's religion, in relationships, it makes sense to say, well, it's very important to me that they share my Christian faith.
Right.
Yeah. So, in other words, it would be wrong to say I won't hire you because you're a Muslim, but I think it's okay to say I won't marry you because you're not a Muslim. Because it's different in that way, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And so you kind of share things, but if you're on that long-term relationship track where you're screening each other for that, you share things that are like a deal breaker, right? You kind of know they are deal breaker. What are your non-negotiables, whatever it is?
Yeah.
This is why I think it's important to share, like I said, your religion, if that's important to you, your religion or that your religious convictions, whether or not you have a kid. This might take a little while, meaning this is not something you'd say on the first date necessarily. But I think if you have an incurable STD, let's say you had HIV, okay? HIV, it's never been, HIV has been treated in so many ways. And there are a few people that have actually been cured with bone marrow transplants and stuff with HIV. But still, I think before you enter into a long-term relationship with somebody, you probably should disclose your HIV status. Particularly if it is positive.
Mhm.
If whether you're cisgendered or trans, some people, I think it would be very wrong to say I will not hire you because you're trans. But I think that
Right.
people would say, well, I consider it's one of my considerations in romance because all is fair. There's nothing that's off the table. And so if
Yeah.
you know you got one of these deal breaker things, I think it's better for you and for your potential mate to share it.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. And it says in a healthy relationship, right? So I think if you do want to have a healthy relationship, like just kind of being honest, why waste your time, in my opinion? And I think we
But
waste time. Oh, go ahead.
no, I get it. I get why, because you go, well, listen, if I tell the if the I'm just saying anything. I'm 30 with a 16-year-old,
Hmm.
right? So then the minute people find out I was a young teen parent, that's all they can see. That's all they think about.
Hmm.
I do get it. I get why somebody would be hesitant to disclose that. Meaning I understand that perspective. But overall, uh, still, that's your life. That's who you are. They can disqualify you for any reason. But frankly, if somebody wants to disqualify me
Hmm.
because if someone wants to disqualify me because I'm 30 with a 16-year-old, then I disqualify them too. Beat it. Because you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's how I feel. Liz just said establishing boundaries, but what was that in reference to?
Yeah. I was trying to figure it out. I'm not sure
Liz, you
what
can
you said.
elaborate if you so choose.
Yeah.
We'll
But you made a
we'll
point. You're making a point about the fact that it's not, because I think some people think like, oh, like it's only up to the other person, and as if you don't have an option in these situations. I think people forget about that piece about their power in the relationship.
Yeah, if somebody doesn't want me because I'm Jewish, I also don't want them because they don't want someone who's Jewish.
Exactly. It goes
You see what
both
I'm saying?
ways. Yeah, I get it. So our next question is asking, do you believe relationships need fundamentals in order to survive? And if so, I guess what are those fundamentals?
Hmm. You want to take this first, or you want me to take it?
You can take it. You can take it over.
So, so I'll be a little pedantic here. Do they need fundamentals in order to survive? The only thing a relationship needs to survive, to limp along, is that each person meets some sort of need in the other, and that's why you see so many unhealthy relationships limp along, because it's like, well, I'm a narcissist and they're codependent or something like that, right? Where you go, man, I would not want to trade place with these people, but they actually been together 20 years, so you could limp along with anything. But I'm gonna embed in this that
Oh,
they
right, because that's surviving. They're just surviving the
survive,
relationship.
right? Like you see so much of that I know people would limp along with all types of
Yeah,
relationships that they just hook into each other. They're like a puzzle piece, and they
yeah,
fit into each other, and that's all it takes. And they keep
yeah.
going. But people look at them and they go, "Oh, that's my nightmare. To be trapped with somebody like that, that's my nightmare." But if we say survive in terms of like to thrive, let's try to make this a little more challenging for us, Celeste.
Yeah.
What about for a relationship to be healthy? What are some non-negotiables? I think.
Uh,
Oh,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, 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 go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, I can say one is that the big part of a relationship is valuing the other person enough to make some sacrifices. In other words, we can't be together, but everything has to be my way. And I don't just mean like, what are we having for dinner? Although that is like an example of that's true. Anyone who's been in a long-term couple is like, oh my God, you love this place. But then you're like, all right, we'll go. We'll go, even though you go like, I would never, if it wasn't for you, I would never go to this restaurant again. But you go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But a more general like your needs, I don't put you ahead of me, but your needs are valued too. They're part of the equation. A
Yeah.
relationship where one person doesn't value the other person's needs, they go, well, if I'm getting mine and you're getting nothing, that's fine with me. That's not a reciprocal relationship.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
What comes to your mind, Celeste? What are some things
What
that you think?
a big thing that comes to my mind when it comes to someone having a healthy relationship and being healthy, I think individually it's important for the person to come to the table whole, not expecting the other partner to fulfill that piece, that puzzle piece you talked about. I think that we don't realize how much we get into relationships with all of these issues. Um, and that's something that your partner can't fix. And I think that when people like are struggling, they scream like, oh, let's do couples counseling. A lot of times they just need their individual counseling, and being whole, or understanding yourself, because we're all coming with different struggles, will really allow the relationship to thrive in a way that people, beyond people's wildest dreams. What's your
Mm.
thoughts about that piece about the individual self?
No, it makes sense to me. I think people, there's something in like romantic comedies that makes us love the idea. You complete me, Celeste. You complete me. I felt like if you left, it's like my heart is leaving and all these things. But in
Yep.
actuality, a healthy relationship's more like I'm a complete person, and Celeste,
Yeah.
you compliment me. You
Yeah.
you are. I'm like a dope jacket, and you're like the perfect matching pair of slacks. But
Mm-hmm.
you're not like one sleeve where I'm incomplete if
Hmm.
you're not there. I'm
Right, right,
complete in
right,
myself. And
right.
because there's too much pressure to put on another person, if you think of them that way, then
Yep.
it they won't possibly live up to it, and they'll
Yep.
disappoint you. And it'll be, you'll say like, I need you to breathe. Like, you got to be able to
don't
breathe on your
don't
own.
put that pressure on me, bruh.
One thing, there's a lot of things about the past in terms of
Yeah.
relationships 70 years ago, 170 years ago, that are worse. But one
Yeah.
thing that's better is people didn't used to have as much of an expectation. This speech you'll hear, I want somebody who's my lover, my friend, my confidant. I'll be their
Yeah.
coach when they're down. They'll be this. They're my everything. It's
Hmm.
not good to be, ideally, you get married, but you still have friends. You still
Yep.
have hobbies that don't include the other person. I don't mean that none of them include the other person, but
Right.
it can't be when a couple gets a couple's Facebook page and neither one can go anywhere without the other one. It's a recipe for a disaster because it's too much. It's like living on a desert island. Just two
Yeah.
people on a desert island. Like, it's not good.
Hmm.
I think it's important not to let that happen.
Yeah, and a lot of times, it may not start off that way, but the other party may oblige to what they say, and before they know it, they're like not hanging out with their friends. They're not doing that guys trip or their girls trip every year, or whatever it is that they do individually. And I think people tend to lose themselves, their individual selves, when they're in relationships like that, where they're looking for that completion in the other party.
Exactly. So you want to really avoid that. Oh, Liz is answering. Uh, uh, oh, there we go. Liz, we asked Liz, what does it mean boundary? She said, in reference to disclosing information like having children, it helps to give information to help form boundaries that are appropriate for each person. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Like, I might not want to get into a long-term relationship with somebody who has 7 children and I don't have
Right.
any. I'm
Right.
not, whether that's right or wrong in terms of romantic relationships, you get to just choose that, I would say. I'm struggling
Hmm.
to think of anything where I'd say you shouldn't be able to use that as criteria. Every
Hmm.
person should be able to form their own criteria, and therefore
Yep.
they need the knowledge to make that to make those determinations.
Yeah, I agree. You wanted to say something else?
Are there any other fundamentals that you need? I actually, sometimes people say like, they say you have to communicate, and I agree with that. You have to have you have to have a way of communicating, but it's not the same as you have to tell your partner everything. I
Yeah.
personally do not think that that's useful, right? To tell your partner every single thing. What do you think?
No, I mean, I think you're right. I think that the reason why a lot of people struggle with being in relationships is because of some of these kind of, what do you call them, explicit,
Ex-
implicit ideas that people
Implicit,
have about.
yeah. Usually I say implicit contracts, the deals
Yeah,
that we never talked about, but I've decided you've committed to.
yeah, yeah. This scares people. This really scares people away, because they don't feel like they have their own privacy. They don't feel like they have their own thing. And I think that whether you're in a long-term relationship or marriage, I think there's this idea that you are like, we are like one. Like, you are not like your own. You don't have your own. You can't like do your own thing. And I think that's drives relationships to the ground, because that's not like, we only have one life. And if people were more secure, I think they would be a little bit more comfortable and understand the importance of their partner just kind of having a life. Not saying they have the secret life, but just having a life.
I
Because
agree
a
with
marriage
that.
is, or a long term, whether your partner, whatever, that's one aspect of somebody's life, right? Like it's not their entire life. And for some reason, I think we look at it as the entire life, or a lot of people do.
Right. The idea is if I found the right partner, they would be perfect in every way. You know, the phrase like soulmates, like, oh my God, we're tailor-made in a world of 8 billion people. We're tailor-made is just to be perfect for each other. Isn't it amazing, Celeste? My soulmate also lived in Boston. Isn't that amazing? I live in Boston. There's 8 billion people. What are the chances? It's a
Hmm.
silly idea. When I talk about not telling your partner necessarily everything, I just want to give examples of that. So let's say that Celeste, you and me are together, and your mother is annoying to me. I find
Hmm.
her annoying. She's not doing anything wrong. I just when she makes jokes, I don't like them. I
Hmm.
wouldn't choose to hang with her if you weren't there. If I just be like, damn, Celeste, your mother's mad annoying. What am I accomplishing with that? Do you see what I'm saying? Like what how does
Yeah.
that help anything? Right?
Yeah.
She loves her mother. I'm not asking her to do anything because her mother can't change. It's just her personality. Her mother
Yeah.
wouldn't be my best. Her mother is disqualified for being my best friend.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what's even better? Just saying nothing. Just shutting your
Yeah.
mouth and saying she doesn't. She comes by. Once a month, and I can endure it or whatever. And she probably endures stuff like that for maybe she doesn't love my mother or
Right.
something else like that. Or
Right.
right before we're going out somewhere, and she's put on a couple pounds, and then she puts on the dress that used to be flattering, and now it's a little less flattering. There's a roll somewhere,
Yeah.
but we're leaving in 5 minutes. This is the only dress that she's got,
Yeah.
and she goes, "How do I look?" And I say, "Well, you put on weight, and we both know that. Is that what I should say
No.
right before we got to go somewhere? No, you
No.
just say." You look great, honey. Oh, I can't believe I might not even let you leave the house with me because you're looking this good. We might have to take a little break for ha ha ha. And then at another time you can talk about, I've been thinking about really hitting the gym hard again. What do you think? At another time.
Yeah.
But saying
Yeah.
at that moment, like, you gotta roll. Who are you helping? Who does that help? People think they gotta tell their partner everything all the time.
Yeah.
It sounds funny. They care so much about you and what you think that you have a lot of power just to be telling people everything all the time.
Yeah. So it means that using a little restraint and being mindful of like what am I trying to achieve by this, right? Like when you're doing that. So that's a good example.
Exactly.
The next question says, I have been single by choice while I focused on my career and personal goals. I'm ready to start dating, but I'm not sure where to begin. I'm not sure where to meet people or whether I should be online dating. Do you have any suggestions on how to meet people?
Hmm. Well, first of all, you don't have to choose. You can meet people in person and try online dating. The thing about online dating to keep in mind is that it has its own culture, and the culture can be a little brutal if you're new, right?
What do you mean?
So people are basically skimming through you. They're swiping left, they're swiping right, right? They're sometimes sending. These are strangers, so
Yeah.
sometimes they're. So what swipe left means I decline. Swipe
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
means I want you. But so you're saying like, do you want to get to know me? And sometimes it's going to be hell no. So you got to be ready for that.
Oh, you
Sometimes,
know that they swiped left?
well, if you swipe right on somebody and then they don't, you know it. But also, you get what I mean? Because if you both swipe right, you'd connect.
Okay.
So if you swipe right on somebody and then you never get hit back, or you
Okay.
message somebody and they never message you back, they leave you on red, that can feel a little rejecty. But
Okay.
then on top of that, particularly if men face a lot more rejection on these dating apps.
I'm sure.
But both people face both or all types of people face some type of rejection. But women sometimes face really people might hit you with vulgarity, right? They might do things online that they wouldn't do in person. Right? In person,
Right.
people might not necessarily hand you a dick pic, but on
Right.
on the apps, they definitely might send them, or
Right.
just
Right.
or
Right.
say stuff that if you're not ready for it, you go. It's like because it's like it's like how the comments under YouTube videos are rough.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So too
Okay.
can online dating be rough.
Huh.
It- uh, Something I saw that I like. I like this idea. First, you try to go to where the activities you do. You said you focus on career and personal goals, but if, for example, if you're a gym person, meeting someone at the gym, that's a good place because you already have something in common, right?
Yeah.
Or if you like gardening, you join some gardening collective, and oh, what a surprise, we're both gardening. But there's
Mhm.
one other thing you can do, which is it's a little counterintuitive, but as a woman particularly, go out alone. And by that I mean if you go to like some mixer or something like that, if you go out with a group of 4 or 5 women, it can be a little intimidating to be approached.
Yeah.
But if a
Yeah.
woman goes out, she's dolled up, but then goes out by herself, that's the least intimidating you can be for someone to kind of initiate the old school way and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
what are you doing here? Oh, do you like this? Can I buy you a drink?" That's something you could try.
Yeah.
You're trying to
I like
be approachable.
I didn't I think this online dating thing is good that I never thought about the being ready for like the comments and all that stuff. I guess that's why people turn it on and off. I have people say I'm taking a break from it. It's probably I didn't realize like it's probably because it's a lot of just information and maybe rejection that they don't even realize they're feeling. But
It's a
that's a
lot of
great.
rejection. There's a lot of particularly men are most likely to be rejected, but still women get plenty of rejection. So there's
Yeah.
rejection, but more than that, it is there's an impersonal nature to it. People will say things to you online that they wouldn't say to your face,
Yeah.
and so people can feel like, oh my god, it's a jungle out there. And so
Yeah.
you got to be ready to know it's actually the medium. It's not as though, right? Because she's saying, I've been single by choice, right? Basically, I turned off dating altogether. You turn it back on, then you go, oh my God, everybody's mean and rude. It's not
Oh,
really that.
okay.
It's like,
Yeah.
again, it's the way like Twitter is full of people that call people slurs, but they don't call people slurs in the street. Something
Right,
about the
right, right.
impersonal nature of Twitter makes people behave that way or permits them to
Yeah.
behave that way. And so Tinder has the same effect on
Effect.
people.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And let people know that just because somebody doesn't uh accept you doesn't change who you are. I think that's one of the things that people struggle with.
We talk about it again and again. It's about being a match. It's not
Mhm.
about if maybe somebody loves watching old sci-fi. Maybe somebody doesn't love watching old sci-fi. Ideally, if you love watching old sci-fi, you'd love to meet someone who also likes watching old sci-fi, right? It's not if they don't like, oh, they're better than me or they don't think I'm good enough. We're looking for a
Mhm.
match, right? We're looking for the things that complement each other rather than saying like, if only I was good enough. And so kind of
Mhm.
keeping that mentality, basically not putting your self-worth in the hands of strangers because they won't honor it. I guarantee
Right.
strangers don't honor your self-worth. You have to, as you date, you're being yourself, you're putting yourself out there, you're accepting. Some people are going to rock with it, some people are not going to rock with it. A lot of people aren't going to care. That's okay.
Mhm. This last question, I want to put. It's not even let me put the whole thing up. That's how long it is. I'll put it in your private chat so you can respect my boundaries. So bear with me, because we always say, oh, we wish we knew more, and I think this person, um, respect my boundaries. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna read this question.
Mhm.
And pretty long, but we're gonna start. So I'm gonna put it in the chat.
Mhm.
I have to break it up a little bit so that um it can be there. All right, so they started off with saying, um, the subject said, "Don't look for a partner who is eye candy. Look for a partner who is soul food." So the way they set the question up, this is a quote. It says, "I'm only interested in soul food at this stage in my life. I am interested in a partner who has shares my core values, someone who has emotional intelligence, someone who is supportive, someone who is always working on his growth and engages in my personal growth, someone who accepts my flaws, someone who is understanding, respectful, honest, kind, and respects my boundaries. I know that it appears to be a tall order, but I know my worth. Quan, I'll get to your question right after this. Sorry, I just seen it. I'm going to finish this book, this thing. Okay,
I can
sorry.
see the second half.
Oh, okay. So I'll read it to you see it. Okay. I have been single for almost 3 years now, and I'm going to go on my first date in a while this weekend. That's dope. I am not on any dating apps, and I'm going on this date because my friend recommended him as a quote unquote real stand up guy. I want to cut to the chase. Um, yo, you remember what's her name? She was like, I want my eggs cracked.
Right,
Let
exactly.
me finish. I'm so sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to cut to the chase and straight up ask him his core values on a date. One, because if we do not share the same core values, I do not see this being a successful relationship. Do you have any advice for me on questions I should ask? Is there a quote unquote societal wait time? This person must be in school because they be using quotes a lot. For deeper questions to be asked. I do not want to quote unquote scare him off, but I also want to get to the core of who he is. I am out of my element here, and I need some help from my two favorites, Celeste and Jeff, on what would be the best part um, to ask the quote unquote tough questions.
Mm-hmm. So I think this person knows, right? I think that I think this person knows that if you cut to the chase, the way you're describing, if you send this to them in a text, right now, let's say you send this to them in a text, I think you will scare them off. And the reason why is because it's a subtle dance, getting to know somebody. And there's no way to just cut to like, look, are you everything I dreamed of or not? That's not going to work. Instead, I think an incremental approach is called for, where, whatever, you're going out, let's say you're going out to dinner. Why don't you let the goal of this be to enjoy the dinner? Let's say you're looking for a friend instead of romance. Do you screen for a best friend this way? Is this how you found your best friend? Did you say, hey, listen, are you trustworthy? Are you going to have my back in good times and in bad? They're like, hey, I just wanted to play double dutch. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, in the same way with a romantic partner, you're looking for these things. You're looking for the cues of these things. But even if you just come out and ask them, that's not necessarily going to give that to you. Because if I say, hey, are you trustworthy? Trustworthy people say yes, and liars say yes. So asking outright doesn't even do anything for you. That's something that's demonstrated. And so you go on a date and you see how they behave. How do they treat? I'm just saying, how do they treat the wait staff? How do we interact? When we talk about stuff, values are revealed. As people tell stories about themselves, their values are revealed. And you just pay attention and you're just along for the ride. In other words, don't put so much pressure on yourself or this person to like be everything on the first date. Just say, like, I want to have a good time tonight. I'll be who I really am, and hopefully I'll see who they really are. And if I enjoy it enough, you know what I'll get out of it? Someone to go on a second date with. And that's it. And over time, which is not that long, I don't mean over 7 years. I mean over a few months, you get to know somebody. But you're not going to like get to know them on this one date. If you feel like I don't want to waste time, then what you really should be doing is not grilling individual daters. You should be going on more dates. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think the time waster, I think people get caught up in, and the cadence of the question, it feels like the letter writer, you may be putting a lot of pressure on yourself for this to come out with like this expectation for like all of your questions to be answered on day one. But playing devil's advocate, I get the idea of like, I don't want to waste my time either. And so I guess, what would you say to this person to help them think about, like, do they ask questions or do they just kind of go with the flow?
I mean, a fun thing. So when I'm trying to understand people, I mean, I'll give you a little inside baseball. When I'm trying to understand people, I don't say like, are you let's say it's philosophy. Are you a deontologist or a utilitarian? Most people don't even know what that means, right?
Mhm.
But what those are, basically, are you do you feel like the process matters more or the results matter more? Is basically what that means. Does the end justify the means, right? Would you
Yeah.
kill one person to save 5? That's a
Mhm.
utilitarian might say yes. A deontologist would say no, killing is wrong, right? A utilitarian would say yes, 5 is more than 1. But you ask questions, or you as you talk to people, you kind of come to understand who they are, at least as described by themselves. And
Yeah.
over time, so you can ask questions. You could like look up like good questions to ask to get to know somebody, or like there's something that's like 10 questions to make somebody fall in love with you, right? But the real thing is, it's not that it makes them fall in love, because that's not real.
Yeah.
That promise is not going to come true. But what will come
Right.
true is something like, tell me about a time. If the one question is like, tell me about the happiest day of your life, the day you felt most fulfilled. And that's how you cut the small talk and get to something real.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
get what I mean? These kinds of things, right? Tell me
Yeah.
about something. If heaven is just you living your best day over and over again, what would your heaven be?
Yeah.
That's like how you make conversation that's deep. But if you just go, look, listen, I need to know. Are you trying to have kids? Are you trying to do this? You trying to do that? It's gonna go bad, man. It's gonna go bad, because that's not how you build an authentic relationship. And I'll be honest, it feels a little bit. At least I can feel the baggage when somebody behaves that way. I can feel that they say, I've been hurt so much that I no longer have patience to develop an organic relationship. That's what that says to me.
Yeah. Uh-oh, did you freeze? Oh, I thought you froze. No, yeah, I like the idea of those kind of questions where it doesn't seem so like uh I'm grilling you, right? But more so I'm really getting to know you. And not looking at, like, let's say it's not the right fit. It's not looking at it as a loss. Like, I think people get really discouraged. And you stay in that discouraged state when you are framing it that way and putting pressure on it. And it sounds like in this case, this is a recommendation from a friend, which, it's good. At least you got some kind of idea on who this person is, which is nice. But
Stand up
obviously,
guy.
yeah, stand-up guy. And so making sure, and some of that is anxiety coming out, like, okay, what about this, what about that, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, because it feels like a lot of pressure. And so trying not to put that much pressure on yourself is important, I think.
The goal of it, if I could pick your goal for the day, and I can't, you get to set whatever goal you want. But if I could pick it, I would say the thing you're deciding is, have I enjoyed myself enough that if I wanted to know anything, I just want to know, would I like to do this again sometime? So one
Mhm.
date at a time for a little while. And then eventually 1 date becomes 2, becomes 4, becomes 1 day he came over and then he never left. And then now we've been married 3 years.
Yeah, that's good. I think this is like a kind of a trolley question.
I'll hear it.
Of
Look,
course you will. I don't think I've ever had a
Celeste, your mic just killed. Can you hear me? Speak again. Right
hello.
now it's static. Yep. It's gone bad now. It's something about the connection, Celeste.
How about now? You can hear me?
Now I can hear you. Great.
Okay, I'll take it off.
Okay. Do you want to read this question, Celeste?
How often should a woman slurp up a man's D? And does he prefer in morning or night? And also, what are some of your favorite positions?
So I would like to disqualify this last question. Not the whole thing, but the favorite positions. I don't see how that's possibly pertinent to our advice show, Celeste. But the first one we can answer. How often should a woman do X, Y, Z? I'm gonna broaden it and say, how often should
Of course you do it now. Of course you come in now, right, Ursula?
right. I'm gonna broaden it and to say, like, really should how do we determine how frequent sexual interaction should be, right?
Okay.
How do we determine that? Now, in terms of consent game, the bottom line is it's whoever, if both parties don't want to do it, then it shouldn't be done, right? And that's just a non-starter. So if one person says yes, one person says no, the answer is no. And so both people have to turn their key.
Yeah.
That being said, in terms of what makes a relationship function best, ideally, everyone's getting their needs met to the point where they never feel starved, right? They always say basically like, how often should you eat a day? Some people eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Some people just eat breakfast and dinner. But if you go a day without eating, there's a good chance that things aren't going great, right? And in the same way, in terms of sexual interaction, if people are wanting a lot more than they're getting, that is a recipe for disaster. And so it's not just a woman. If anyone is in that position where they're wanting a lot and getting a little, even when people try to say, well, sex isn't everything. It's not everything, but it's a lot. You know what I mean?
This is I take a deep breath. This is I was telling my husband about like a lot of people like in marriages are only having sex once a month. I'm trying to get back to the question. And he thought it was a joke.
Well, first of all, then congrats that he can't even imagine that. I'm glad to hear that.
He thought I was joking, and then I had to show him the stats. I had to show him the stats. And I think when it comes to sex, it's one of the like struggles that long-term couples tend to have. I'm trying to do this the right way. Part of the struggle, I think, is that especially I think women, we do a lot of work outside of the home and we're taking care of people. I follow a lot of sex therapists too, who talk about this stuff, how women don't know about like pleasure, enjoying themselves in different ways. And so like sex is typically the last thing on their mind because they're tired. And so like not prioritizing like any of their needs is something that unfortunately happens. And then it's kind of like, how do you like as a partner, whether, there's different type of relationships, but if one of the and this can happen with the man as well, it doesn't have to be a woman. But like, what do you do when those needs aren't being met, where you're not sounding like an a-hole, where you're recognizing like they are doing a lot? Like how does that conversation happen for people, you think? Because you're right, like when someone's needs aren't being met, like how is that a deal breaker? And like, how do they get to the point where they can manage the relationship where both parties are getting what they need?
Right. So I'm gonna make generalizations here, but it's not individual results may vary, right? Just like on average, men are taller than women, but Brittany Griner is a lot taller than me, right? So it's not true for every individual, but on average, right? A very common thing that you hear if you listen to sex therapists or whatever it is that the man in a heterosexual relationship, the man feels like I'm not getting enough, and the woman feels like, oh my God, enough with this complaining, right? That's not uncommon. So there's a few things about it. From the man's side, first of all, make sure before you bring up any complaints like that, you're making sure that all these interactions are working to your partner's basically where your partner is enjoying themselves maximally. So the old style of thinking, the 1940s style of thinking was the idea that sex is like something the woman grits and bears and does for the man. That is a bad recipe.
Yeah.
Right? Women can and hopefully should and would enjoy sex, but the guy has to make sure he's not just doing what he thinks she likes or what the internet has taught him she likes, or what she actually likes. Right? There's a degree to which women can be like a combination lock, right? And you have to really listen. It's not just like put the key in the lock. It's not all that it is. But let's imagine the guy's done everything along those lines, sometimes women could keep in mind. I've heard it referred to, maybe you've heard this before, Celeste, as reactive arousal. So in other words, a man might, well, you know this, if many men, you wake up ready to go, right? You just wake up, right? That's what it's like. Women don't necessarily have that equivalent necessarily. But for a woman to realize reactive arousal is like this. Basically, if I dance for a minute or two, then I want to dance. Right now, I don't feel like dancing. But if I only let him kiss my neck and we dance for a minute or two, then I will want to dance. And I think that sounds very familiar to many women, particularly once you got kids, you're working, you're doing all things. You're not pressed like he's pressed. But if you just if you say like, well, let me give a few things a try first, right? And then again, it's on the guy to not jump right to 100, to start to eat. Man, it's hard to talk in these vague ways, but to ease in. But I don't mean ease in. I mean, you know what I mean? Not jump right to 100. And so these are some things. But get the engine. Thank you, black girls getting their shift together. Thank God you saved me there. Get the engine warm. You don't just put the key in the ignition and floor it. That's not what we do here, right? So you do all these things. So, for example, the question writer said, it was Quan. He said, how often should a man get slurped? Well, you can slurp in either direction. And you want to talk about a way to get a warm engine? Some slurping has warmed some engines in my experience, right? Some engines that they didn't start warm, but by the end of it, they're warm. And so all these ways are ways to do it. But in the end, you don't want it to become a thing where the disconnect is such where one person feels like they're being starved, because it's a huge part of, we talk about sex as if it's just release, but of course you could masturbate if it was just that. It's intimacy. It's like, what are we doing here? The feeling of rejection, being rejected within your partnership can be very painful, right? Because well, it's supposed to be only you and me, but now you're just saying no to me. So I'm just supposed to what? Just lay down and die? And so a lot of truly a lot of relationships, long-term relationships, suffer from this sort of thing. And I think that people should, you should ideally, if at all you can, you should start with a yes. And if there's a reason for a no, a no. But it can't be like it can't be a chore or a treat. Oh, if you clean the garage, maybe you'll get lucky. Right? Like, not that kind of like we do this. Do you know what I mean? Because we're a couple and we do it. Again, consent is real. So if you really don't want to, you shouldn't have to. But you understand what I'm saying. Part of being a partnership that has it is that basically, if imagine if when your partner wasn't hungry, they locked the fridge. They locked it and only they had the key. And they go, well, I'm not hungry, so you shouldn't be hungry. That's not what it feels like to be hungry. When you're hungry, you just say, yo, if I don't eat, if you don't open this fridge, I'm going to McDonald's.
Yeah, you're right. And obviously we're starting off with the fact that consent is key, right? Like, so we're not like saying nothing crazy. And I do know, like, especially women as they have children, or you feel different, right? And you don't feel like yourself, and you struggle with some of the things you may have found joy or pleasure in before. And so being mindful, like, because when I think about sex too, it's kind of it's a medicine too. These old ladies, I be seeing clips, they was like, what's the key? And they was like, sex.
Yeah.
But I think the mindset, right? I talk a lot about mindset, not in regards to sex, but in general. When you approach it like a chore, when you approach it like, oh, this again, your mind, your system will feel that way. And so like I started thinking about it differently, like, okay, like not thinking about it in that way. And just like going with the flow. I remember reading something. This is after I had kids. I remember reading about it and I was like, okay, let me try it. Literally what Jeff said. I found an article that talked about it that way. And it just shifted my mindset, and it definitely helped me not look at it in that way. But I can see how it can get that way with just when you think about all the things you have to do, not just you did that day, but thinking about things you have to do tomorrow. I feel like, I know there's more than just heterosexual relationships, but I sometimes feel like guys, they just have a one-track mind. So they're not thinking about what they got to do tomorrow. They're just like in the moment. And I think, I mean,
well, no, you're not hurting. I'm shaking my head of how I wish, how when women sometimes they have their period or they give childbirth, they said, I wish you could experience this. I wish you all could experience the internal pressure of being a man. Yeah. And there's a woman laying 1 inch from you. She's laying 1 inch. And I'm supposed to just do what? Watch TV? No.
And so men tend to have a more of a one-track mind, I think. So the pressures of tomorrow can be tomorrow. in the moment, we want to be in the moment. So really thinking about, and again, earlier we talked about the fundamentals of a healthy relationship. It's like kind of knowing yourself. And so as you're changing, especially in relationships, they change, right? You're dating, then you maybe have kids, you have more responsibilities. So the time's not the same. You got to sneak around when the kids go to bed at 9 o'clock.
Goddamn kids. Get out of here. Get a job. Beat it.
You just gotta adjust. And I don't want to say you just gotta adjust, but you got to be mindful of the adjustments that are taking place in the relationship as you guys are still together, and not just blowing it off. Just don't blow it off. I think it's important.
If somebody, put it this way, if you're a couple, transactional sex, when I said, if you clean the garage, you get lucky, that would be transactional, right? The idea is it's like oftentimes a couple will eat dinner together. And then if someone just stopped eating dinner with you, they didn't say it, but they just one day, they just weren't ever home at dinner time again. You'd be like, hey, this is nuts, right? Mm-hmm. If you usually sleep in the same bed, but then they just stop sleeping in that bed. They didn't say anything. If you bring it up to go, it's nothing, but they just sleep on the couch every night from now on. You'd say, what the hell, right? So if sex dries and dwindles, once a month is perfectly fine if that is both person's appetite. Right. If they both say, well, that's what, it takes me 29 days to build up my appetite, that will be fine. But the issue is oftentimes it's not the case and one person's not getting their needs met.
Yeah. So I think we answered all the questions. That last question is a struggle for a lot of people. Not sure if they were trolling, but I actually appreciate.
They knew they were being. Quan knew that they were being irreverent, but the question is legitimate.
It's a legit question. Yeah, I'm like, this is actually a legit question. That
one more thing I forgot to say. Of course, remember, sex is free. It releases endorphins and oxytocin, good hormones.
That's what I was trying to say. That's why I got Jeff here, because Jeff is smart. I was trying to say it's like a medicine, but the endorphins and all that. Yep.
It releases all that. It's if you do it right, it's cardio, right? There's a lot to recommend it. Mm-hmm. So make time for it. On your deathbed, it's unlikely you'll say, you know what, I wish I had less sex. Very few people are going to say that on their deathbed. But a lot of people are going to say, I wish I'd taken advantage of that time when I had someone next to me that I loved and liked, and they felt good and they wanted to please me. They won't be like, I should have done those Excel spreadsheets that my boss was up my ass about. They won't be saying, you'll be saying, I wish I busted open more. That's what you'll be saying. So
thank you. That was good. All right. We had a lot of questions. So remember the last question. So the first one, we talked about somebody's like, can a kid be okay if a parent has a negative attitude? The second question, we talked about not disclosing, like, is that an omission? The third question, I've been single by choice. Now I want to date. And then we also had a question about, like, when I do go on, it's so crazy how it all lined up. I put it in order in that way because I was like, but when I do go on this date, like, how do I, talk about my like desires without like kind of scaring this person off? What are you seeing as a theme, or how do you want to wrap up the show today?
The theme of a few of these is about living in the moment, right?
Mhm.
The date has a lot to do with living in the moment.
Yeah.
And what we just talked about, even the sex has to do with living in the moment, not letting, what you got better to do than this? We here, we're together.
It's a mindset thing, really. It's really a mindset thing.
All these mindsets, a lot of these mindset issues are about appreciating where you are right now, right? The agonizing over the past leads to depression and anger. Agonizing over the future is anxiety. Living in the present. I don't mean you don't plan. I don't mean you don't learn from your mistakes, but we're here together now. So let's have a good date today. Not who are you? Are you going to be who I want in 3 years? I don't know. But can we enjoy dinner tonight? I'm busy, so I don't want to do this and that. I hear you, but sex is good. You've enjoyed it in the past. Let's try to enjoy it right now. This sort of thinking, I think, is oftentimes the cure for what's going on. What's this last question? What are your thoughts about parents reconnecting as newly empty nesters? Meaning the parents don't know each other because they've been in parent mode while neglecting being a couple. Oh.
I'm going to say it again because I think I talked over you just for my audio listeners. Sure. What are your thoughts about parents reconnecting as newly empty nesters, meaning the parents don't know each other because they've been in parent mode while neglecting being a couple? I think that's great.
Wow. Yeah. Black girls getting their shift together. That's a very, I assumed you was younger than that. You know what I mean? But no, you could be asking for a lot of reasons. I think when I see this, I think that folks have to be very intentional because what happens is when you have kids, they dominate your life. They're your purpose. For a little while, you don't have to. Kids are very hard. They wear people out. You'd be tired. You see you go to any elementary school and you look at the parents picking them up and they are whipped. But here's the thing. They're your purpose. You don't have to wonder, do I have my priorities straight? If your kids are your first priority, then you do have them straight. Then at a certain point, they leave the nest. They don't need you. They go away to college or they move out, they join the Navy, whatever they do, and suddenly you got all this time back. Dinner is just about you. It's not about whether your son's allergic to this or your daughter doesn't like that. And a lot of people at that point, they struggle because they just spent 20 years having this one purpose. Yeah. And with a couple, they might find that the only thing that was holding them together was this shared investment.
Yep.
And so you do have to kind of find love again sometimes. And I would be intentional about it instead of looking for it to just happen. You got all this free time back and you say, hey, you want to take this photography class with me? Or, hey, we always talked about going to Antarctica, but I say we go. And you have to try. If you don't try, I think it's not likely to just happen because nothing's going to come into your life that's as dominating as having kids was. So you have to do it now instead of having it happen to you the way kids do.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I say F them kids. No, I'm just kidding. But it goes back to my point on as the relationship changes and things are added, kids, house, responsibilities, etc. Being mindful of being intentional about the relationship. It's something we have to schedule dates. We have to, that connection. So it's great to reconnect as empty nesters, but I want to challenge you don't have to wait until you're empty nester to be able to create that connection. You can create the connection while you have kids. It's not going to happen by accident, right? We live in a society that's a hustle and bustle, that's like work and all, climbing the ladder, and while like home and your pleasures being neglected. So for couples, really being intentional on creating that intimacy, and intimacy is not just in the bedroom. I think it's more than just that, so that you can kind of stay connected. But that was good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And let people know how they could find you.
Well, you could always, if you you could email me, jeff@rogersleads.com, or you could go to rogersleads.com and, there's a place where you can ask whatever question you want. Not like this, but if you need or want to connect, we can do that. All right.